Commentator Karen Strawn once put it ever so bluntly, feminism is socialism in panties. Now, I know the phrasing is crude, but the mechanism is 100% accurate. I can say it another way. Feminism is socialism translated into policy, quotas, and subsidies. The old socialist storyline of oppressor versus oppressed is pasted onto sex, with men recast as owners, women as workers, the home reconceived as a factory floor, and a managerial state installed as the boss. Now, once you accept that map, the sequence follows with numbing predictability. Laws override custom and contract, bureaucracies police speech and behavior, and ordinary dissent is rebranded as betrayal. Distinct schools of feminism may wear different labels, sure, but they converge on the same demand: centralized power over private life. That is the mechanism on the table here. And what I will show you is how it spread like a cancer and why it should never, ever be implemented. So I'm going to connect dots most people keep in separate boxes. Feminism as a political program belongs under the same exact collectivist umbrella as socialism and communism. Now, it may present itself as a different vehicle, but it runs on the same engine of centralized social engineering. The arc is consistent, from the Enlightenment's grand universal words to the French Revolution's conversion of politics into mass identity, to 19th century socialist schemes, to Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels systemizing collectivism, to the Soviet experiments with sex, family, and work, and then finally to the 1960s convergence of the birth control pill, the sexual revolution, and American policy overlays. So my claim is straightforward and simple and consistent. Real-world feminism requires central planners to reshape private life, and every time it has been tried, just like socialism and communism, it has produced predictable damage rather than genuine liberation. Now, let's define terms. When I use the term feminism here, I'm not talking about ordinary respect for women as persons with dignity. That is non-negotiable. I am, however, describing a political project that organizes women as a bloc and employs centralized authority to steer family, sex, work, language, and law toward planned outcomes. Planned outcomes. That's what I mean when I say feminism. And when I use the word collectivism, I mean the premise that group identity and centralized control should direct private affairs toward officially defined goals. So my critique is of the ideology, its incentives, and its social results, not of individual men or women making hard choices in difficult circumstances. So I'm going to be talking about the Enlightenment to the French Revolution. So the Enlightenment raised up universal words: man, reason, rights. So John Locke spoke of life, liberty, and property. Immanuel Kant called for public reason and autonomy. These ideals were powerful because they promised a standard above the whims of kings. But here is the problem. Once you define an abstract ideal for everyone, you need an enforcer. And enforcement, by definition, is coercive. Lysander Spooner, the 19th century American anarchist, saw this clearly. Rights are inborn. They are not delegated to rulers. The so-called social contract is a fiction. No one ever consented to be bound by it. No one. The French Revolution took the Enlightenment's universal ideas and turned them into mass politics. The Declaration of the Rights of Men and of the Citizen proclaimed liberty and equality, but left out women, slaves, and colonies. Olympe de Gouges wrote her Declaration of the Rights of Woman in protest. What mattered most was not consistency, but the mechanism. Identity blocks sorted, rights proclaimed, and the state cast as referee and planner. Now, once you concede that private life may be rebuilt to match an abstract plan, almost nothing remains off limits. And then jumping forward to the 1800s, industrial capitalism produced misery and inequality. Entered the utopian socialists. So there was Henri de Saint-Simon, and then there was Charles Fourier and Robert Owen. Each promised harmony through design, communities, collective production, and social engineering. Then Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels escalated the game. In the Communist Manifesto in 1848, they systematized collectivism into historical materialism. All history is class struggle, capitalism revolutionizes production but self-destructs. The proletariat must seize the state, abolish private property, and reorganize life itself. Now, Lysander Spooner's critique hits hard here. Marx diagnoses exploitation, but what does he do? He prescribes more centralized coercion. The dictatorship of the proletariat is still dictatorship. One ruling class replaced by another. And it's here that feminism bifurcates. Liberal feminists like Mary Wollstonecraft argue for equal rights within the Enlightenment frame, and socialist and Marxist feminists following Engels's Origin of the Family from 1884 argue that women's oppression is bound to property, inheritance, and the household. And their solution, collective childcare, communal kitchens, state-subsidized reproduction. Different slogans, same engine. Treat people as inputs for a plan, with the state as the foreman. Now, when we jump to the early 20th century, the early Bolsheviks proved this model in practice. They created a women's department. They rewrote marriage and divorce laws. They legalized abortion, ran literacy campaigns, and redefined family as a state project. Marriage, sex, and child rearing became administrative levers. Symbols were elevated first, emancipate women, and reality was forced to kneel after. So case study is the Women's Shock Battalion of 1917. Designed partly to shame men into returning to the front. It functioned as a symbol, as a unit. On the battlefield, reality reasserted itself, however. Combat punishes distraction, hesitation, and mercy. The 2015 film Battalion dramatizes this episode. It is not a documentary, but it shows exactly what ideology wanted citizens to believe. That women could embody resilience, yet combat is not symbolic, it's unforgiving. Now, in the film, the female unit, it fractures into shouting under pressure. One soldier, she wanders off into La La Land and starts daydreaming picking clovers and is killed by German troops. And another group of women, they capture a male soldier that lowers their guard when he appeals to them, as fellow humans through small talk, and then he kills them and escapes. And so I say that not as mockery, but it's simply observation. War requires discipline, aggression, violence of action. Men supply these traits in greater measure. J.R.R. Tolkien captured it in The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, when Éomer says to Éowyn, "War is the province of men." It's not chauvinism, it's recognition of a reality older than any slogan. Now, behind the lines, women bore unique burdens in Soviet prisons. They endured the same hunger and cold and interrogations as men, but sex became a survival currency. And some traded it for food or protection, Others refused and died. Even separate women's camps that were, billed as humane often intensified suffering. Bathhouse inspections stripped dignity. Trustees determined privileges. Protection meant ownership over that individual. The pattern is consistent here. Collectivist systems treat people as materials to be allocated. That suffocates dignity and corrodes relationships. Now we fast forward a few decades here to 1960. The birth control pill is approved by the FDA. Technology resets incentives, habits, and expectations at scale. The sexual revolution tears down guardrails, religion, stigma, extended family. Some of those restraints were unjust, but others provided stability people only missed once gone. The pitch sounded modern. Separate sex from marriage, marriage from children, and children from fathers without cost. But here's the thing, cost never vanishes. It migrates from institutions to individuals, from adults to children, from the present to the future. Then policy layered over culture. Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society launched sweeping programs in welfare, housing, education, and health. Now, incentives matter. What you subsidize, you get more of. What you penalize, you get less of. Pay people to form weaker bonds, and you will get weaker bonds. Penalize marriage, and you will get less marriage. The state cannot create virtue. It can only subsidize behavior and punish behavior. Subsidies spread, penalties choke, and families pay the price. Now, equality of dignity is non-negotiable. Equality before the law is essential. But equality of outcomes does not exist, cannot be manufactured, and should not be pursued. Men and women are not interchangeable. Their differences matter and often complement each other. The slogan of equality hides the mechanism. Because if results are unequal and you demand they be equal, someone must enforce that outcome. And that someone will always be the state, treating people as problems to be solved. Equality of dignity secures liberty. Equality of outcomes invites control. The record is consistent. Feminism as a collectivist ideology promises emancipation and delivers management. It promises fairness and delivers dependence. It promises equality and delivers control. The Enlightenment gave us the grammar of rights. The French Revolution turned it into mass identity. Socialism and communism and Marxism scaled it into central planning. Feminism absorbed the same model and pushed it into the family, sex, and private life. Lysander Spooner's warning holds. No state has legitimate authority to rule. The so-called remedies of collectivism, whether socialist or feminist, are not liberation, but subjugation. The West today lives in the aftershock. Institutions feminized, masculine strength devalued, families destabilized, birth rates below replacement, trust eroded. The bills are coming due. The arc of collectivism confirms the warning. What begins as universal ideals ends as bureaucratic control. What begins as promises of liberation ends as the state seizes your private life. The lesson is simple. Collectivism is always the same engine under different paint. And once you see the engine, you will never mistake the slogans for the reality again. Masculine republics give way to feminine democracies, and feminine democracies give way to tyranny.